I want to start this journey with a photograph taken in 1980. It portrays a man in his 60s, wearing a pair of classic trousers and a brown jacket. He's sitting on the floor on what appears to be the deck of a ship. His back is resting against the ship's painted steel wall, and behind his glasses, his gaze seems thoughtful, and he's concentrated on a small notebook that he holds on his knees where he's jotting something down. The man in the photograph is Primo Levi, who, in addition to being a famous Italian writer and journalist, was a chemist by profession. I can't be absolutely sure, but in the photograph, it seems he's taking notes and trying to calculate how many tons of paint must have been used to coat the Castoro Six, the shipping vessel he's on. It was the first question he posed as soon as he boarded to Master Pietro Costanzo, who promptly replied, 150 tons. Perhaps it was a way to break the ice, but also to get an idea of that semi-submersible Saipem ship that would host him for the next 30 hours. An experience that was the foundation for a report published in the monthly magazine Ecos entitled The Men of the Multifaceted Ingenuity. Primo Levi defines the Castoro Six as a ship non-ship, full of equipment and apparatuses, which to a landsman like himself reminds him of the Nautilus from 20,000 leagues under the sea. At 152 meters long, the Castoro Six is equipped with 8 welding stations, a complex mooring system, X-ray machines, and a launching ramp for laying underwater pipes. But it possesses very few characteristics of a ship. It does not have a pointed bow to plow through the sea. It looks more like a floating platform. Even the crew is different from any other. On board there are engineers, mechanics, electricians, fishermen, sailors, multiple professions and talents, but all guided by something special, multifaceted ingenuity. This journey begins right here. From the spark that guides great companies, it begins with ingenuity. I'm Michael Los, and this is Ingenuity, a podcast by Cora Media in collaboration with Saipem. A journey through the projects, technologies, and engineering solutions of a company moving towards the important goal of shaping a sustainable future. If you don't want to miss the next episodes of this series, click the follow button. And be sure to activate the bell notification. And we'd love it if you'd give us 5 stars on Spotify. Every era has its surprising inventions and revolutionary technologies that change the way we look at the future. Today we are fascinated by artificial intelligence, by voice-controlled devices, or by self-driving vehicles. At the end of the 70s, when it left the Trieste shipyard and sailed the sea for the first time, the Castoro Six represented an absolutely avant-garde piece of work, hosting on board the most innovative systems of the times. The simple fact that it was able to remain still in position despite the currents, or to move with millimetric precision to allow the laying of pipes on the seabed, is in itself something unique. Unique, just like the project in which its role was central. That project was the construction of the Transmed gas pipeline, today named after Enrico Mattei, the man who more than anyone else had the intuition to see Africa as an energy resource. Transmed is a maze of underwater pipes and ducts that transport natural gas from Algeria to Sicily, passing through Tunisia. A complex infrastructure which reaches a depth of about 600 meters, a record for the time, extending for about 2,400 kilometers. To give you an idea, more or less the distance between New York City and Dallas. Who knows what it must feel like to be the central figure of such a huge undertaking? To know that with your work, your effort, and your ingenuity, you are bringing new energy to an entire country. Pietro Costanzo, the first master of the Castoro Six, told me about it. Several years have passed, but his voice still conveys the pride of having taken part in that adventure and still projects the authority of the person who, from the ship's bridge, guided the operations to give life to that engineering marvel.
Io ho iniziato a lavorare in Saipem con i supply vessel.
I started working at Saipem with supply vessels, and then I moved on to the pipe-laying vessels, Castoro 1, Castoro 2. I worked on all the Castors. I already had a maritime master's license as shipmaster, although it had some limitations. But when Saipem decided to build the Castoro 6, I asked myself a question. Why, I said, does an outsider have to come in to be the master of Castoro 6? Come on, why can't I do it? So, despite the experience that I got in the North Sea and in the Persian Gulf with Saipem, working in many different situations, some perhaps even more complicated than those on Castoro 6, so at 37 years old, I went back to school. I got my diploma, and I started working on Castoro 6. And I must say, on the Castoro 6, there was a level of excellence. We had everything. In those years, we had the best of everything. The crew on Castoro 6 was made up of two teams: a maritime team headed by the captain and a construction team headed by the construction manager. These two teams didn't work separately. We did our jobs together. Sailors, welders, winch operators, mechanics. We all collaborated together to successfully get the job done, which in those years was a colossal ingenuity. The whole project was said to be just about impossible, because we had to reach depths of 610 meters. And positioning those pipes in their exact position at those depths was quite a complicated thing.
In 1983, the first Transmed line was officially in operation and transported 12.3 billion cubic meters of gas per year. It was the first fundamental step towards the methane gasification of southern Italy. In the following decades, the pipeline was expanded several times with the construction of new lines, reaching a total capacity of about 30 billion cubic meters of gas per year. These numbers, said like that, tell us little and may be hard to comprehend, especially in a world that is moving towards new resources. So to understand them, we need to go back for a moment to those years. Or rather, to be precise, to 1973, when the word austerity began to circulate throughout the Western world. Until then, oil was the main and preferred source of energy, the one that fueled, in the true sense of the word, economic development, industries, and the transport sector. But within a few weeks, the scenario changes radically. The oil crisis causes the price of crude oil to soar from $3 to $12 a barrel, forcing many countries to adopt drastic measures to reduce consumption. In some European countries, for example, for a few months, electric signs of cafes, shops, and supermarkets remain shut off. A ban on using cars on Sundays is introduced. And in Italy, the only news program at the time, which was broadcast at 8:30 p.m., is moved to a half an hour earlier. All this to allow us to go to sleep earlier, saving electricity. Once the crisis is over, the world is no longer the same. We must reduce our dependence on oil, diversify, and focus on alternative energy sources. And so, gas becomes increasingly strategic. To understand this key step in energy policy, I asked Alessandro Blasi, special advisor to the International Energy Agency, the intergovernmental organization that, not surprisingly, was founded immediately after the oil shock of 1973.
With the oil embargo made by some OPEC countries and the economic shock that followed, many countries, many governments, many companies as well as people in civil society found a big incentive in looking for alternative source of energy. It's in the 70s that the nuclear power made a big boost in many countries. Renewables started to be considered, even if at infant stage, and the natural gas took off as a new source of energy across many sectors. The legend says that people exploring was used to say, the bad news today is we didn't find oil, the good news is we didn't find gas. This is just to say how the natural gas was considered a by-side product with not a big added value. But then, finding new application, finding ways to transport and to distribute across multiple economic and social sectors, natural gas has become a very important source of energy in many parts of the world. When we look at the global energy mix today, the role of natural gas has evolved significantly since the 70s. Today, natural gas is the third most important energy source in the global mix, immediately after oil and coal, and is the energy source among the fossil ones growing faster, to the point that, according to International Energy Agency data, in 2024, the global demand for natural gas will reach its historic high. The reasons are essentially two for such trend. The first one is a sectorial driver. A lot of industrial processes requires natural gas to produce fertilizer, to produce plastic, to produce steel and other things. Natural gas is extensively used. The second driver is geography. Gas is very important in many countries around the world, but is growing very fast in emerging ones. China, India both are seen registering double-digit growth rate for natural gas for multiple reasons, including replacement of coal. We can also look outside the emerging world and look at a case like the United States, where the so-called shale revolution has unleashed a lot of natural gas, very cheap, abundant, that has displaced a lot of coal in US domestic power generation.
Every time we turn on the hot water faucet or turn on the stove, we can do so because someone has made sure that gas reaches our home, and because geologists have studied the subsoil and discovered a gas deposit, and because ship masters like Pietro Costanzo have led vessels into difficult-to-reach areas, and because engineers have developed complex systems in the depths of the sea. I spoke with some of these people in their ship cabins in the middle of the sea and in offices scattered across all continents. They told me that building a gas pipeline is never an easy undertaking because every project has its obstacles and challenges. They approach these challenges with a virtuous mix of techniques and ingenuity, ingredients that have always made the difference in the history of Saipem from the 1980s to the most recent projects. Let's look at the case of BlueStream, the 236-mile gas pipeline that connects Russia to Turkey across the Black Sea. It's 1999 and the world is preparing to enter the third millennium, an important milestone full of dreams and expectations. Astronauts will set foot on the first International Space Station. Broadband will pave the way for new ways of communicating, and Europe will unite under a new single currency. The future's there, within reach, and is just waiting for someone capable of imagining it. This is what Saipem engineers do every day, and right at the start of the new millennium, they are grappling with a challenge that has never been attempted before. Before telling you about it, I'm going to ask you to make an effort of imagination. Imagine being in the Grand Canyon at the highest point, and you're looking down into the abyss below, over 1,800 meters deep. Keep this image in mind. while we go back to the office and into the minds of the engineers who have to figure out how to lay an underwater gas pipeline, actually 2 twin gas pipelines, at a depth much greater than that of the Grand Canyon. We're talking about almost 2,200 meters, a depth that, in 1999, had never been reached. This is far from an easy undertaking, and to complete it, 3 things are needed. The first is a pipe-laying system that is different from, as we'll call it, the classic system, which is not suitable for such deep waters. The newly developed method is called J-lay. To put it simply, the pipeline is laid vertically, forming a J-shaped curve from the surface to the seabed. The second thing that is needed is a ship that allows this type of laying. And if it doesn't exist, they have to figure out how to create one. So they installed a cutting-edge J-lay tower on board the Saipem 7000, an extraordinary ship that we will encounter several times on this journey. Seeing it, it looks a lot like the launch pad of a space shuttle. Okay, so far we've talked about the technique. We've talked about the means. But what has allowed BlueStream to go down in history as the most challenging deep-sea pipeline ever built is this third element, the most indispensable of all, the team, or rather, the teams. We are talking about hundreds of professionals who work in synergy, like an orchestra following a score of music. Even if you're not a musician, you probably know that each piece of music has its own rhythm and pace. Even the singular instruments within a piece play at different speeds. At Saipem, it's like conducting a harmonious orchestra at a quick pace. Most engineering work demands to run fast. But of course, if there's a need for a project or operation to slow down or stop, it will. Especially when working in areas where environmental protection requires special attention. After crossing the Mediterranean with Transmed and the Black Sea with BlueStream, our navigation takes us to the Baltic Sea, one of the most complex areas from an environmental point of view. This is where the Nord Stream gas pipeline passes, another extraordinary story of ingenuity. Completed in 2011, it is the longest and heaviest underwater gas pipeline ever built, a double line, each about 1,200 kilometers long, starting in Russia and arriving in Greifswald, a small university town in the northeast of Germany. And right here in the bay, many challenges inspired the development of new procedures. Let me give you an example. In some places, the depth of the water is so low that it was necessary to dig a sort of trench to accommodate the pipelines. But in such a particular habitat, rich in biodiversity, you cannot just simply dig. You have to carefully remove the soil or sediment, one layer at a time, then store them in a safe place, and then once the pipeline has been laid, put them back in their place layer by layer in the exact same order. And then we need to think about the fauna that lives close to the shore along the coastline. The ships, which are further out, are equipped with mercury vapor lamps, like those once used for street lamps, and they attract insects with their white lights. It's a major problem for bats along the shoreline, which are left with very few insects to hunt. Turning off the lights would obviously be impossible, so engineers and environmental experts sit around a table to find a solution. They redesigned the entire lighting system on the ships to direct the light beams to only the work areas. And they find ways to shield the lights, making them less visible from the mainland. Another problem solved. Well, I believe that when Primo Levi spoke of multifaceted ingenuity, he's referring precisely to this, the ability to be versatile. And when you find yourself faced with an unexpected event and you're at a fork in the road, always look for a third way. And speaking of alternative routes, Perhaps at this point, you are wondering, how do you bring gas to territories where there is no gas, or to where the distances are so great it prevents the construction of gas pipelines? Once again, you use ingenuity, as Alessandro Blasi here tells us.
When we look at the history of natural gas industry over the last few decades, I believe there are two fundamental elements that has determined the destiny of natural gas industry as it is today. The first element is about abundance of natural gas. The second element is technology development. The oil and gas industry is not new to always try to refine and improve its technology performance. But one important thing I believe for natural gas industry has been the development of what is called LNG chain, the liquified natural gas chain. It means that gas has become available to demand centers that before were not reachable. Until, let's say, a few decades ago, only those countries that could have been connected with pipeline to gas-producing center had the possibility to utilize gas in their own energy mix. With the liquefied natural gas, the availability of natural gas has become open to demand centers, including in the emerging world, that were very far from producing center and therefore started to introduce this energy source in their mix.
As a matter of fact, liquefied natural gas is not a completely new technology. The first experiments on liquid methane were carried out in 1800 by Michael Faraday, a British experimental physicist, one of the greatest in history, to whom we still owe a lot today. Over the years, of course, the technology has been perfected, and today we are able to transform methane into a liquid state by cooling it to 260 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, or in Celsius minus 162 degrees. This procedure greatly compacts the space it takes up, and therefore can be transported by ship with volumes 600 times smaller. But it's the same thing in a different form, you might say. So what's the big deal? Well, it changes a lot for the immediate future of energy. It creates easier storage and transport. It allows for the geographical diversification of energy sources. And above all, it contributes to the transition to energy security, guaranteeing many countries the uninterrupted availability of energy sources. With ingenuity and experience gained over the years, Saipem has become a reference point in the liquefied natural gas sector. It has certainly built an important track record, and one of its most representative projects is part of the expansion of an existing plant in one of the most remote areas on the planet. Go get a globe, or open the Navigator app on your phone, and look for West Papua, the Indonesian province on the eastern edge of the Pacific Ocean. To get there from Europe, it takes about 30 hours of travel, with several stopovers and a long journey by sea. We are talking about a place so far from everything, but holds a treasure, a rich natural gas deposit called Tangguh. Tangguh means powerful in Indonesian. In 2016, Saipem engineers began a very complex operation, the development of an additional train for the Tangguh liquefied natural gas plant, which involves a series of infrastructures both in the open sea and on the coast. Bear in mind that 18,000 tons of steel were used to build the plant alone. That weighs more than 2 Eiffel Towers, and with the added difficulty that Tangguh is not in the center of Paris. Instead, it's in a very remote place without roads or services of any kind. The first challenge, therefore, was logistical. The second, perhaps, is even more difficult because it's a challenge against the status quo. One of the peculiarities of this project was the involvement of a very high number of local professionals more than 40% of the total workforce. Given the complexity and the number of hours needed to complete the work, Indonesian statistics predicted that most likely 3 people would lose their lives. An unacceptable figure, to which Saipem responded with safety procedure courses for those who work in the field and for the site managers who were committed daily. The project ended with 129 million hours worked without accidents. It's not only a record to be proud of, it's also the demonstration that with determination, experience, and even a pinch of ingenuity, you can do things that others consider impossible. So we started this journey in 1980 and have gone through more than 40 years of history. A journey from one end of the world to the other, aboard the Castoro Six, and also on other vessels that have been protagonists of these operations. Today, the Castoro Six has been retired, making way for other, even more high-performing vessels, and some of these continue to be called Castoro. A curious name for a fleet, but one that has an important meaning, because Castoro means beaver, and beavers are the best engineers in the animal world. They know how to build dams, make their dens more spacious, dig into the ground using very complicated techniques, and move through the water with great agility. It's no coincidence, therefore, that today, Saipem's most cutting-edge vessel is called Castorone, Big Beaver. At more than 330 meters long, it's one of the largest pipe-laying vessels in the world, and it's also one of the most versatile. I asked Alessandro Lombardi, engineering project manager at Saipem, to tell me what is so special about this ship. He explained that the first fundamental characteristic is that it has no anchors, but is able to manage its position with extreme precision. But that's not its only surprising feature.
Castorone is the lead vessel today for Saipem because has a set of features that allows to make the work faster and easier. For sure, the first topic is relative to the dynamic positioning of the vessel that allow the laying of scenario that are very deep, and the system that is using the dynamic positioning and with the thruster system is able to keep the vessel in position with an error that usually is within 20 centimeters, so very precise. And in addition, and as a big difference with respect to the mooring vessel, there is a huge benefit because there is no need to interfere with possible assets that are present on the seabed. Other huge characteristic for Castorone is the lay rate, because it's able to lay a quantity of pipe that is quite high and much higher than the other vessels that are present today on the market. And there are 6 or 7 working stations that in the fabrication part of the vessel are able to lay a huge quantity of pipe per day. In addition to that, maybe the highest characteristic of Castorone is the capacity of change the setting during lay, because there is the need, where there are scenarios starting from a shallow water and then going deep water, to change the setting of the vessel and the stinger that is the system to lay the pipe on the seabed. And this capacity, without abandoning the pipe on the seabed, is allowing a lot of earning time and as well for the cost.
And it's precisely with Castorone that the Scarborough project in Western Australia was recently completed. It's a pipeline over 430 kilometers long, which connects the gas field off the coast with a liquefied natural gas plant located on land near Karratha. A perfect challenge for Castorone, because the area has a very complex morphology. The seabed goes from 200 to 1,400 meters deep in just 10 kilometers. But it's not only the technical aspect that makes this project particularly ambitious. This gas field will establish an energy source with one of the lowest carbon emissions globally, and will confirm Australia as one of the largest exporters of liquefied natural gas in the world, together with the United States and Qatar. In addition to coating and installation of the pipelines, Saipem has also worked on some very special coupling devices that look to the future. These are highly technological structures designed to connect the pipeline to other wells or other lines. In this way, if different needs arise tomorrow, or new deposits are discovered in the area, it won't be necessary to build new pipelines. I believe that the value of engineering lies precisely in this continuous dialogue between the present and the future, between the needs of today and those of tomorrow. And today, the world still needs gas, and liquefied natural gas technology plays a fundamental role because it leads us to other energy sources. But there's also something else that the world needs, perhaps even more important, and that's ingenuity. Men and women whose talents benefit the community by developing new and increasingly advanced engineering solutions. Ingenuity is a podcast by Cora Media, produced in collaboration with Saipem. Written by Alessandro Menozzi. Translated and narrated by me, Michael Los. Editorial curation by Graziano Nanni. Sound and music supervision by Luca Micheli. Post-production and editing by Aurora Ricci. The project manager is Anna Nenna. The producer is Alex Peverengo. The post-production coordinator is Matteo Scelsa. The studio sound engineers are Luca Possi and Lucrezia Marcelli.